Some quarterback punk. Johnny Unitas or something.
I am Governor Spencer Cox.
I'm ready.
And my preferred pronouns are he, him, and his.
Johnny Utah gets his guy.
Governor Spencer Cox. He, him, and his. My preferred pronouns. Governor, he, him, and his.
I'm out of here, bye.
Special Agent John Utah, day number 1 in LA. Welcome aboard.
Do you run your Twitter account, by the way?
I run it personally.
Yeah.
Johnny Utah gets his guy.
It's been heavily encouraging Democrats to join the caucus system and vote in the Republican primaries. And I just wondered if that was you or if that's your team running that.
Absolutely. Are we seeing some people register as Republicans? Yeah, I hope so. I think. Yeah. Come on. Come on, join us.
Special Agent Utah.
Not bad, Utah.
My preferred pronouns.
Special Agent Utah.
It's McMuffin. Do you know who McMuffin? McMuffin. He ran against me too. They said he was going to do great. He didn't come out too well. Even Hillary beat him.
Utah, repeat. Say again.
Governor, he, him, and his.
Remember that? He was going to win the state. He was going to win the great state. Utah, that was going to be trouble.
My preferred pronouns.
Special Agent Utah.
Evan, how you doing?
Good, how are you? Adam? Great. Are you with someone or?
My preferred pronouns.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if you had condemned the 10, 11 months of riots that we had previously as well.
10 or 11 months of riots.
Yeah.
Special Agent Utah.
Did you condemn the protesters that took over the Capitol during the Kavanaugh hearings? No? The Kavanaugh hearings, they banged on the door of the Senate, interrupted proceedings. Did you condemn those, Evan?
I'm out of here, bye.
I'm not a crook.
Hey, what's going on, Utah? This is Adam Bartholomew, Cruising Maine, episode 4. Welcome to the stream. We are live on Facebook, the Utah presidential campaign, Twitter at Life is Driving, and the mainstream media Utah live page. We're live on YouTube. We're live on Rumble. If you go into Rumble and search for Main Street Media Utah, we are live there. You can check us out. You can subscribe. You can do all that stuff. I think we got a good show for you here today. There's a bunch of stuff going on in the Utah legislature. We've got some updates on the bills that have been passing. We've got some fake news to visit. We're going to be taking calls here on the show. And we've also got some guests. I've got my wife coming on who's running for Utah School Board, Carrie Bartholomew. And she's going to be coming on and talking about a new bill that's being proposed in the state legislature. And I have a special guest on today, Aaron Davidson, the Utah County Clerk. It's going to be a good show. Definitely tune in. Definitely tell your friends and share this stream out if you can. It really helps us. It really helps Main Street Media Utah. We're trying to grow the network here and get people a voice. We're trying to give Main Street a voice here in Utah because the mainstream media is really biased and it's basically like the propaganda arm of the Democrat Party here in Utah. So without further ado, we are going to start the show. Hey, it's Special Agent Utah here. Thanks for joining the stream. And let me share my screen here. Let's see. Hope everybody can see this. So we got some major news that's blowing up. The Utah County mail-in ballots won't have prepaid postage in 2024 to cut costs and encourage other voting methods. And we've got Aaron Davidson, the Utah County Clerk, joining us here. Let me bring him into the stream. Aaron, are you there, sir?
I am. Hey, Adam.
Hey, thanks for joining us.
Not a problem. My pleasure.
Good to have you. So this article has been making the rounds, and actually, you've been getting some heat from some other elected officials here in Utah. Let me just briefly change the window here.
That looks better.
Okay. So I've got here a tweet from Deidre Henderson, the lieutenant governor and chief elections officer here in the state, and she says, "The bad news, Utah County Clerk will no longer put prepaid postage on voters' mail-in ballots. The good news, if you don't have a stamp, you can mail it anyway. It'll still be delivered to your Utah County Clerk, and they'll be billed for the postage." And then I have another one here from my own state senator, and I don't think Mike McKell will mind me calling him the self-proclaimed king of rhinos. He's he changed a screenshot in a local group here, the cover photo saying we love rhinos. So Mike McKell, Rhino King here in Utah. He also frowned on this, and he says, "Aaron Davidson, Utah County elections must stop playing politics with our ballots." And then he has asterisk, I wish this wasn't the only questionable move from this cycle from Utah County. Laws matter, election integrity. And on the article that I had just had up, let me pull that back up here. don't know how to do the switcheroo that easily here. So I got to do a little.
Well, can I make a quick comment on that?
Please.
So Mike McKell says laws matter, and under Title 20A-3A-202, subsection 8, ministers in election is not required to pay return postage for a ballot. So that's the law. So I'm not sure how I'm playing with the law. If that's, I don't have to pay for it.
Yeah, how are you playing politics here? And the Herald Extra article says ballots sit in that's just a picture. Utah County will no longer be offering prepaid postage for voters' mail-in ballots during this year's election, something the county has had in the past. Utah County Clerk said he has decided not to have prepaid postage on the ballots after the county was searching for ways to cut costs in departments this year. Utah County's budget is in a nearly $10 million deficit this year. So the question that I have here is, why wouldn't these supposed fiscal conservatives, Deidre Henderson, Mike McKell, and other state legislators, why wouldn't they, especially in a $10 million deficit year, why would they not support a common sense measure like this that not only saves the county money, but also promotes, in the opinion of many, safer ways to vote?
That's a good question. I've wondered that too. It's, I think it's a better way to promote the use of the drop box, because when somebody drops off a ballot in our drop box, we are required to have two people with that ballot at all times. Whereas with the U.S. Postal Service, there's no cameras on those drop boxes. There's no cameras watching what people are putting in the U.S. Postal Service boxes. And then I'm not sure how many people touch that ballot, who touches it, how many people are there watching it. There's no controls, and a lot of voters don't realize the importance of their vote. A lot of them say, I like to fill my ballot at home and put it in my mailbox. How long is that ballot sitting in their mailbox with nobody watching it?
That's a good point.
Yeah, it's just sitting there, and someone could come by and get it, and use a moisture heater on it and open it up and put in a new ballot. I'm not saying this happens, and there's no evidence that it happens, but it's just the chain of custody. Once we receive it, we have to have two people watching it. Whereas going in the U.S. mail, there's not that same level of custody.
Definitely. And I don't know if you've seen the news, but just over the weekend, there was a semi-truck carrying mail here in Springville that caught fire. And I don't know if it was a USPS truck. From the headline, it said it's carrying mail, but I think it opens up it opens up the vote to all kinds of, questionable things in the chain of custody, like you're saying.
Right.
But we have there's a big push. Lowell Nelson, he did a whole hand count roadshow. There's I know that you personally ran when you were running for office back in, I think it was 2022 during the convention. All of your opponents were saying that you need to stop saying that we're going to push back against the universal mail-in voting. There's nothing we can do to push back against this. And you insisted there was things that can be done. And in my eyes, this really proves that you were right. And I think that you were, as far as the delegates putting you on the ballot, they elected you for a reason, because of the things that you were saying and the issues you were raising during the campaign. Why is it that that our elected legislators, seem to be so complacent on the issue of mail-in voting? Why do you think that is?
I wouldn't say all legislators. There are a couple that are reaching out and doing some moves to get some sense of reasonableness in the mail-in process. And I think they probably won't pass, but at least people are starting to think about it more and more. One of the hard things I have is, once the election is over, there's a canvass period of 2 weeks. And I only have those 2 weeks to do any kind of analysis as to what I'm seeing happening in the whole process. And after those 2 weeks, my hands are tied. I can't go back and look at it. One of the things I'd like to do is I'd like to go back and look at the postmark on the envelopes, because there's just some questions I have that I'd like to do some analysis on, but I can't do that because the state legislature says that after 2 weeks, all voting material are locked up for 22 months unless you have a judge saying you can go back and look at it. And one of the things I'm concerned about is when people drop off their mail at a postal location, all of the mail nowadays is gathered up and sent to Salt Lake to be postmarked and processed, and then it's sent back out to the cities to be delivered. So if somebody drops off their ballot on the day before election and it's picked up and taken to Salt Lake, but some things slow it down. I don't know what the whole process is, but if it gets up there and it doesn't get processed before midnight, the postmark is actually going to be on election day, and that ballot won't count. So we had about 650 ballots that we couldn't count because the postmark was after the day before election, and most of them were on the 21st. But there's no guarantee as to when the post office actually received it. It's just when Salt Lake received it and got the postmark. So if you want to talk about voter disenfranchisement, I think there's ample evidence right there that there's no way to guarantee that those ballots were processed properly on the day before election.
That's a good point. Back in 2022, several of your opponents acknowledged, some of the risks with universal mail-in voting, and they even acknowledged to me on camera. I was filming people during the debates back then, and they said that mail-in voting was wrought with fraud in other states and even other counties. Some of your opponents pointed directly to Salt Lake County and said, "There's fraud there, but here in Utah County, we don't have that." It really seems like the established elected people up in the Capitol Hill are really kind of complacent about mail-in voting here in Utah. Just for our viewers, can you briefly, is there a difference between universal mail-in voting and mail-in voting in general? Can you explain? Is there something that kind of different there?
Well, I think universal mail-in balloting is everybody that's an active voter gets a ballot. So Kira, what's Kira's last name? Birkeland. She's trying to promote opt-in mail-in balloting rather than opt-out mail-in balloting. And I like that idea. I think it'd be great. I'd like it to be somehow, if you want to get a mail-in balloting, somehow you have to come in and confirm your identity that you're still there. Somehow, I'm not sure how, every 2 to 4 years. But just mailing a ballot out to everybody, we got about 10,000 ballots that came back to us that were undeliverable. Actually, that might be a little high. I'm thinking that I'm mixing some numbers up for some reason.
It was a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot. The 10,000 is actually, we emailed out. We had to do an email to everybody, and 10,000 emails were found to be bad email addresses. So we had to delete all those 10,000 email addresses. So our records are not completely up to date. We try our hardest to do that. But if people don't notify us that they moved, unless they fill out something at the DMV or the Postal Service, we can't find out that they moved. So it's fraught with inexactness, and we are doing our best and hardest to keep that up to date as much as we can. So mail-in balloting and universal mail-in balloting, I think the biggest difference is more of an opt-in and or opt-out, whereas Utah is an opt-out right now. So we have to mail it out to everybody.
Yeah. One of the things I talk about a lot on my channel is uh, things from the coast, left-wing policies from the coast coming into Utah. And one of the reasons that I'm so worried about this kind of voting is that we moved here in 2021 during when the lockdown was still happening in Washington and registered to vote. But we still got in 2022, we voted here in Utah. We still got our Washington ballots in the mail here in Utah after leaving. And I know that back in 2020, the King County, which is it's the county that Seattle is in up in Washington. Their voter rolls were estimated to be 14 to 20% or something out of date. And then when we moved here, we kind of saw that in real life when we got our ballots here, even after we had registered to vote here. And I don't know if I think a lot of people ignore that, or they missed those kinds of problems. I really appreciate what you're doing, and I hope we can get our election information up to date. But this is the latest thing, obviously, but is there other ways that you plan on pushing back against this mail-in voting in the future as the county clerk?
I came into office thinking I was going to be able to find something that would point to some nefarious things going on, and I haven't found any specific evidence of it in Utah County. But again, like I said, 2 weeks, having access to the ballots for 2 weeks is a very short time period, and it's really hard to do any kind of analysis within 2 weeks. I wish I just emailed the legislator saying, hey, it'd be nice if the election officer had more than 2 weeks to look at ballots to do some kind of analysis. But like I said, I only have 2 weeks to do it, and it's just not enough time.
What happens if when we're mailing these ballots out, we get them back, we obviously, or I believe we feed them through machines to count them. What happens if an election is decided by? I know we had one maybe last year down in Washington County. An election was decided by a very slim margin. What happens in that scenario?
Well, within a slim margin, there's a mandatory hand count or a recount. I think it's a recount more than a hand count. We had 2 mandatory recounts for ranked choice voting in Utah County because of the way the laws were written, that if it falls within a certain percentage, you have to do a mandatory recount. But they were meaningless recounts because they were lower tier candidates on the ballot, and if the recount had gone either way, it wouldn't have mattered because all of those votes rolled up anyway. But we had to take almost a week to do 2 recounts on lower tiered candidates in the ranked choice voting. The 2 cities that did, 2 of the 5 cities that did ranked choice voting. We had to recount Vineyards and Payson's ballots. And it was just a complete waste of time because they were lower tiered candidates. If it had been a close race between the top 2 or top 3, it would have made sense. But these were, ranked 4 and 5, and all their ballots or all their votes rolled up anyway.
Interesting. I know there's a push for hand counts in our elections, and if we ditched machines and went totally with hand counting our ballots, which is what a lot of people in the Republican Party, in the delegates, in that group of delegates, they really want that. Is that even a possibility? Is that we're running a $10 million deficit here in the county. For those people that really want that, is that even a possibility?
It's always possible, but the probability is very low. And part of the problem is since we stopped voting at the precinct level and just doing it vote centers, consolidated vote centers, we don't have the equipment now. All that equipment was sold off or gotten rid of.
Really?
And so to do it at the precinct level, you'd have to go back to a lot of a paper system and sending the precincts, again, the voter roll for that precinct. But most people now are so used to being able to vote where you want to, close to where they work, close to school, close to something, rather than voting at the precinct level. So in order to go back to a hand count, you'd have to almost go back to the precinct level voting, so that not one voting center is counting thousands and thousands of votes. They'd only be counting anywhere from 500 to 2,000 votes at a precinct.
I see.
But we just don't have the poll pads. We've switched to poll pads where people come in and they can check their status of their voter registration, in real time. Whereas we'd have to go back to a paper system where it would be at the time we print that piece of paper. So it would be difficult to go backward, but it's always possible.
Okay.
There's a lot of states that are still doing it.
Yeah. Every convention, there is somebody puts forward a motion. It's at least in the conventions that I've been part of the last couple of years. It seems like every time somebody puts forward a motion to move the convention to a hand count and a paper ballot vote. And I know that a couple of years ago at state convention, we had little clickers, electronic clickers to vote. And last year at convention, everybody had an app that they downloaded, or it was a web app. I don't think you had to download it. It was a web app where you could get on and cast your vote. And, I'm of two minds. Like, I really think we should be voting on paper and physically counting the ballots at the precinct level. I think there's a lot of people that say, hey, these other countries do it, we should be able to do it too. But on the other hand, I'm like, hey, we live in this technological society. We should be able to get this done safely and securely. There's got to be a way. And I know that we have this web app that was designed, and I even helped audit the vote after the fact in the convention in 2022, I think, or 2020, maybe it was 2023, but it was the county convention. I personally felt like it was legitimate, and it was meaningful, the way we were able to audit that. And I remember back when you were running for office, I had gotten one of your opponents on camera talking about blockchain voting and moving everybody in the state to an app. And I guess there was a pilot program here in the state for a blockchain voting app. What are your thoughts on that, as far as moving the entire state to a digital voting platform?
I've looked into it a little bit, not probably as much as I should have, just based on time constraints. But from my understanding, some of the audits of the blockchain apps that are out there, they found some major deficiencies in the programs. So I don't believe blockchain is where it needs to be to even consider it right now. And I don't know what it has to happen to get it there, because I just haven't followed up on it enough. But I'm still very leery of blockchain right now.
Yeah, same here. There's a lot of theft of blockchain related tokens and stuff like that. And I think I'm against that at the state level. But as far as the conventions and that kind of stuff, I don't like going personally. I don't like going there and spending 8 hours of my day, at the convention on a Saturday after working a full week. So I do like the efforts to kind of modernize the convention votes. And I know some people are totally against that. Lowell Nelson probably won't be happy with me saying that, but that's the reality. Elections have consequences, and one of the things I've been talking about since the shakedown of, since after 2020, kind of as things have kind of settled down after there, is our 2024 ground game. And one of the things I've said is that Republicans really need to get their voting ground game in order, and we should be harvesting ballots in states where it's legal. We should be, you're not going to win if you don't play the game. Is kind of essentially the point there. What can we do here in Utah County to get the vote, to kind of get the vote out and increase, voter turnout, at the same time saving money, like we're doing with this prepaid postage.
Right. And that's, I think part of the problem is like the Republicans want to get, well, a certain demographic of the Republicans want to get back to in-person voting. And they keep saying, we want in-person voting, we want in-person voting. And so I asked them, well, how did you turn your ballot in this time, this last election? They said, well, we mailed it in. It's like, if you want in-person voting, then you've got to be willing to vote in person, even though you have a choice. They say 98% or 99% of the people in Utah vote by mail with the mail-in balloting. And they assume that all of those that do it that way, that's the way they want to do it. But it's that convenience aspect of it. It's so easy just to fill the ballot in and put it in a drop box and call it good and not go vote in person. Well, if you're going to advocate for in-person voting, then go vote in person on election day and show that that's what you really want. Because if you don't, the mail-in balloting people are going to claim you as on their side.
Very true. How do people opt out if they wanted to opt out and go vote in person?
You just have to send us an email. I think there's maybe even some form out there, but basically if you just call the clerk's office and say, I want to opt out, or send an email to elections@utahcounty.gov and say, I want to opt out of receiving a mail-in ballot. And then there's just a check mark on the voter record that says not to send a mail-in ballot to them. Okay. That they have to vote in person.
And you had said earlier the drop boxes are not videoed. Is that right?
All of our drop boxes have to be videoed.
Oh, okay. I must have misheard that.
The U.S. Postal Service boxes are not on video.
Got it.
Another thing I did implement in Utah County is in the past when you go vote in person, you couldn't take your ballot. They had to print a new ballot for you. Then you'd have to go into the booth and fill it in and then deposit it with them. I implemented what we call the fast cast voting system, where bring the ballot that you got mailed to you, bring it filled out, check in, sign, show your ID, sign the poll pad, and then our machine will accept your ballot the way it already filled out. And the benefit to that, especially during municipal years with the ranked choice voting, is the machine will verify that you didn't make a mistake. Because there's a lot of mistakes that are made in the ranked choice voting ballots. But if you bring it in and cast that ballot, the machine will check to see if you made any what they call overvotes or undervotes. And it'll check to make sure that you are voting the way you intended to vote, because some people make mistakes especially on ranked choice voting. Or even the municipal words, vote for 2 or vote for 3. It'll count how many votes are on that were cast, and let the voter decide if they only voted for 2 out of 3 that they could have. It'll say you only voted for 2. Is that really what you want to do? Or if they voted for 3 and you're only supposed to vote for 2, it'll say, did you voted for 3? We can't count it unless you take 1 off. So it verifies the vote before you leave. That's another advantage of voting in person.
I didn't realize that was a possibility. I kind of like that idea. I got a comment here. Let me pull it up from a viewer, from Alexa Preston. She says, they, meaning the county, should be cognizant of saving money. The commissioners gave themselves another raise again. And it goes back to my original question. but why wouldn't these apparent fiscal conservatives support what you've done in saving the county money? And we have especially it's such a common thing with Republicans nationwide talking about government waste, the government throwing money away, and yet here we are, prepaying for the postage. Do you have any do you have an idea of how much, if you prepaid for postage in the last year, how much of that went to waste? Or does it go to waste? If we were to prepay for all the postage like they were saying, does that go to waste if not everybody mails their ballot?
Well, I mean, it just, I mean, it paid for the ballot to get back to us. I think it more of a, not a waste, but a savings if I don't pay for it. So here's the thing is, when we bulk mail the ballots to the voters, it costs us 14 cents to mail it to them. But when we pay for prepaid postage and they have to mail it, and we pay for that single ballot, 30, 40,000 times, it's 77 cents an envelope for us to get it back. Plus we have to pay for the permit to even have that available to us. So that's what I was trying to save is, it's about 1/3 of the people mail it through the U.S. Postal Service. So they get it for free, but the taxpayer has to pay that. So it's like every voter has to pay 33 cents for the voter that doesn't want to take it to the drop box or to come in person. So it's more of a kind of I don't know, I don't want to use the wrong word, so I'm not going to say it. It's kind of stingy for them to think that, everybody should pay for my ballot because I want to use the postal service, rather than going another mile or so and finding a drop box to drop it in. So I just think that everybody should use the drop box because that's the free way. And if you want the convenience of dropping it in the postal service, then you've got to pay for that convenience. Now, that being said, if somebody still drops it in the postal service without a stamp, the postal service by federal regulations still has to deliver it to us. And the interesting thing is the postal service will still charge us, but without the permit, they'll only charge us the cost of the stamp, which is 68 cents.
Interesting.
So by me saying postal required, it costs the county less for you to send the ballot back than if we say we'll pay your postage. But I'm under the belief that most people want to do what's right, and they know that if they want that convenience, they're still going to put a stamp on it. I think most people still put a stamp, and those people that just kind of want to stick it to me for taking that option away will drop it in the mailbox and not put a stamp on it. Or if people call and say, I'm old, I can't get a stamp, I don't know how to get a stamp, or I'm poor, I can't afford it, I'm going to tell them drop it in the mailbox anyway. We'll still get it, we'll still count it, but we're just trying to save money from the county because the county commissioners asked us to find ways to save money and reduce our budget. And this is one way that I felt was, we'll be saving, if enough people do it, we'll save over $100,000 this year in the three campaign or the three elections. And the main commissioner kind of criticized me for making that decision, even though it was asked of us to find ways to reduce costs.
Yeah, I think there's some, as far as voting, like you said, disenfranchisement, there's definitely a negative. Anytime you do anything involving voting, you're going to get some negative response. And I can see politician wanting to avoid that at all costs for sure,
Yes.
But all right. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show, Aaron, and I think you're doing a great job. And I had quote tweeted Deidre Henderson, and I had said, "This is why we elected Aaron Davidson. This is why you won. We had 3 people running against you, and you were the guy saying the things that many of us wanted to, many of us believed, and many of us knew in our hearts, and we wanted to hear that. We wanted to." Um, we really want someone to kind of stand up for us and and implement the policies that we feel are right. And I really appreciate you doing that. Final question for you: Are the elections here in Utah County safe and secure?
Yes. As far as I've been able to see and the analysis that I've done, yes.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Aaron. I appreciate you coming on the show and taking time out of your busy day. And
Well,
I'll
thank
plan
you.
on seeing you at the convention.
Okay, thanks. See
All
you.
right, thank you, sir. See
Okay,
ya.
bye.
All right. That was Aaron Davidson, Utah County Clerk. And I have to apologize here. Everything's backwards. I got everything backwards because I was supposed to go on at 4, and Aaron was supposed to come on at 5, which he did, but we had to move some things around. So, because we got a late start. So let's go back to the start here. Bear with me. Okay. Where is it? There it is. Okay. Let me just pull up some things here. All right. So if you heard the news, President Trump is planning on visiting Utah. I'm excited to hear about that. I have to ask Rob Axon when that date is. Let's see. I'm really looking forward to it. Okay. Let's move on to let me find that. I'm going to put you back on the countdown here. Okay. So I'm going to bring on a candidate for Utah School Board, who is also my wife, Carrie Bartholomew. And we're going to talk about a bill that has been proposed in the legislature. Let me just go back to this. All right. Share screen. Here we go. Okay. Let me bring on my next guest here, Carrie Bartholomew. Carrie, are you there? Thanks for joining the live stream here. And I've got here on the screen. Oh, here we go. SB 117. Bill sponsor is Senator Reeby, Kathleen Reeby. And one of the things it's a common theme on my channel and here on my show is the left. I call it the leftward creeping. The extreme left policies creeping into Utah, and I've talked about it before. I've done videos on it. I talked about it on my original, on episode 1 of Cruising Maine, and it's things that are in other blue states, specifically Washington State, that are kind of finding their way here in Utah. And one of the things I've talked about is this. Let me just scroll through this really quick. There we go. In Washington State, new laws allow, and this is a 2-year-old video, allows teen gender reassignment surgery without parental consent. And I've talked about it a few times, like I said, that in Washington State schools, the school nurse can facilitate all kinds of things. You can get depression treatment for depression, chemical treatment for depression. You can get suicide counseling. Kids can get abortions facilitated through the school nurse. They can get gender hormone replacement therapies facilitated by the school nurse and paid for by the parents' insurance, and without parental knowledge or consent. So the school, if a student goes to the school nurse in Washington State and tells them that they're experiencing gender dysphoria or identifying, they'll change their name on the school on the student rolls, and they'll also be able to get all kinds of different therapies and stuff, and hormone replacement therapies, hormone treatments for transgendering the kids. They'll get those facilitated by the school nurse. The parent's insurance is forced to pay for it without telling the parent. The insurance companies are restricted from telling the parents about it. And if the parents don't have insurance, the state pays for it. So just by living in one of these blue states, you are actually paying for the gender reassignment, the hormone replacement therapies from for kids, paying for it with tax dollars just by living there. And so we have this bill that's been proposed, SB 117, and I know that you had shared this with me and you had some concerns about it. And the things that you mentioned really kind of reminded me of those issues in Washington State that are going on. And why don't you just take a minute and tell us about this bill, the things that you found out about it?
Sure. This is introducing whole child, whole school. It's from the CDC, and it's bringing in so that basically the school becomes the hub of everything. It's the hub of your medical care, the hub of your therapy, the hub of your spiritual. There's a lot of push for teachers to start yoga and breathing with the kids, things that not everybody's okay with. So it goes way beyond gender. It's when they say whole, they mean whole. They mean everything. Catherine Reeby, I ran into multiple times last week at the Capitol, and I'm not really surprised that she's the one who's sponsoring this bill. I will say, though, because I think it's important to give credit where credit is due, this morning I saw the bill and immediately reached out to Mike McKell, and within 2 minutes he responded and said, "This does not look like a good bill. I don't see it going anywhere." But it is frightening that we're this close, that it's here in Utah being proposed.
Yeah. One thing you had said was one-stop shop for parenting, basically how the state will be raising your kid.
Yeah, it looks very convenient. It looks very, very convenient for that parent who maybe is working overtime to make a little extra money or something, to be able to have your kid have their dental done there. I have a really good podcast with Alvin Louie from Courage is a Habit, and he's really dug deep into all of the research with what it means. Again, therapy is it's being fast-tracked now. So you're not getting necessarily a quality therapist. You are getting somebody who maybe was sped through school, kind of the DEI practices of, ran through the school, and all of a sudden is a therapist, and they're guiding your children. And again, because of people that I know and speak to on my own podcast, there are people, a lot of therapists who are sounding the alarm that therapy is about making change makers. It's a progressive agenda taking over our schools. And so it's about changing the values of the children.
Interesting. And what is this? Does this give more power to the school board, or does it take power away from the school board, or what does it do there?
It's not so much the school board, and currently the language does talk about giving parents some advice or some ability to speak, but it's more of a federal the CDC is behind this. So it's the CDC coming into our local schools.
Interesting. Yeah, we all know the CDC is only out for our best interests, isn't that right? Yeah. All right. Where can people find out more about the kind of issues that you're raising along the campaign trail?
Sure. We just fought the DEI bill. So, we supported the DEI Equal Opportunities Initiatives. And so you can see that a lot of that's on Path Forward Utah, which is minorities who are not okay with the racial division, who just want to be seen as your neighbors and your friends, not pushing this grifter narrative. So that's Path Forward Utah. And then if people specifically want to follow me, I'm on Facebook at Carry for Utah Kids.
Carry for Utah Kids. Cool.
Yeah.
And right now you're seeking the delegate nomination to get on the ballot. Is that right?
Correct.
Cool. And what's your YouTube channel?
My YouTube channel is called Be Not Afraid. And I speak to people about relevant issues. I speak to people who have escaped communism and who are concerned about the direction that things seem to be heading in. They're seeing a lot of the same things that they fled. And I also speak to parents and therapists and all sorts of people who are standing up to this kind of takeover, this gaslighting that we are experiencing. And they're the people who are brave enough to say no.
Cool. All right. Well, we appreciate you running for office, and we'll have you on again.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. All right. That was Carrie Bartholomew running for state school board. Let's see here. So if you heard the news, there's a list. 25 Republican governors have signed on to support Texas in their fight with the federal government over the border invasion. And Spencer Cox signed on to this letter as well. So that was a good thing. You got to give, like Carrie said, you got to give credit where credit's due. Other governors are like Kristi Noem. They're talking about sending I think 10 or 11 other state governors have already sent their the National Guard, their state troops, to the border to assist with Texas. And Kristi Noem's talking about sending out or considering sending razor wire to help the effort in response to, Texas trying to slow the flood of illegal immigrants. And, I got to really applaud those governors that are really sending their support, and doing what's needed to support Texas in that fight. And here in Utah, Governor Cox, he's also pitching in, doing his best to help out by sending. What is he sending? He's sending our thanks. I'm so glad that we have Spencer Cox here to stand up for the border and stand up for Texas and send his thanks. I find it really funny because all these other governors, they said, we stand with Texas, we support Texas, but Governor Cox could not bring himself to say those words, and instead he says we're sending our thanks. He did sign on to the letter saying that he supports the he supports Texas. He signed on to the letter, so kudos to him. But I think it's kind of weak, personally. Like it was a very weak response to what's happening down there. And I know that Carson Jorgensen and Phil Lyman have both taken really strong stances on this border issue. And I wish that Governor Cox would step up and do more. I wish we'd send our National Guard down, and I wish he would rephrase his words there and really come out and say, hey, we support Texas. We are standing with Texas. The state of Utah stands with Texas. And, but he's just not. And so I'm a little bit disappointed with him. But you know what? We are sending our thanks. So let's see here. But if you didn't know, let's go. Window here. Here we go. Okay. If you weren't aware, a reminder that referring to high and growing migrant numbers at the border as a, quote, invasion, which has just been normalized and become commonplace on the right, wasn't always this normal or commonplace, and is a new phenomenon, and is literally a far-right neo-Nazi talking point. So I just want you to be aware of that if you're one of these people that are concerned about the border, and if you're concerned about the high numbers of illegal immigrants coming into our country right now, the millions of people that have come into our country since Biden took office, that you got to be careful what you're saying, because you could be spewing literal neo-Nazi talking points. So be really careful with that. Similarly, let's see here. And it's funny because Biden, Obama, Chuck Schumer, many of these Democrats, they were really for securing the border. They were for border security years ago. A decade ago, the kind of stuff that we're saying on the right was commonplace on the left, even as recently as 2008 when Obama was running for office. This wasn't controversial. This wasn't a neo-Nazi talking point. This is just being concerned about our government and the way things are going. Here's some. I've got some things shared on my Twitter account here. We've got President Biden. Back when he was running for office in 2007, he was asked if he would allow sanctuary cities to exist, and he answered no. That sanctuary cities turn into dumps, and the only reason they exist is because the federal government doesn't enforce the law. That's what we're talking about here. That's the whole problem. And here's another one. 2007 Democratic debate. Obama says that illegals in the U.S. should only be given a pathway to citizenship if the border is secured, so another couple 100,000 don't come in. Another couple 100,000. Now we're talking about millions. Now we're talking about securing the border so that we don't have millions more coming in. And here's another one. And in 2007, in a black and brown forum, Biden argued that illegals drive down wages and that we should only allow in the number that we need for seasonal jobs. But Biden took it a step further. He also said that employers should be required to offer jobs to Americans first. Okay, this is all normal stuff. This isn't neo-Nazi talking points when we're talking about an invasion. Back then, they're talking about another 100,000 or so. Now we're talking in the millions of people coming across our border every year. And if we call that an invasion, then you're accused of far-right neo-Nazi talking points for using the word invasion. Kind of sad. Kind of sad here. Let me go back to another picture here. Man. just play this clip here of Biden. We'll see if the sound comes through.
With Senator Biden, do you believe that, as Anho suggested, we're talking about jobs that Americans won't do? That's often used as a conversation point in this debate over immigration.
Let's get straight. Americans will do any job if you pay them properly. You know, the fact of the matter is, that doesn't mean we don't need guest workers. We do. That doesn't mean we don't need, but we should base the number of guest workers that are in the statute that we're trying to pass, and we tried to pass before comprehensive immigration reform, based upon need, not on an absolute number. And we should require employers to offer those jobs to citizens to see if they want those.
So similarly, let's see here. If you celebrate the demise of diversity, equity, and inclusion policies here in the state of Utah, then you are a white supremacist. Here's Darlene McDonald. She's lashing out here in response to the anti-DEI bill passing here in Utah. Race grifter Darlene McDonald, head of the 501c4 One Utah, says that Trevor Lee is a white supremacist for recognizing that discrimination is wrong. Discrimination based off of the color of your skin is wrong regardless of your motive. It doesn't matter if you're doing it because you're a racist or if you're doing it because you're trying to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. Discrimination based off of the color of your skin is wrong. But Darlene McDonald, if you recognize that, then she will equate you with the Ku Klux Klan or white supremacists or something. She says, one is a white supremacist in Utah. The other is a white supremacist in Arkansas, in an old black and white photo. Can you spot the difference between the two? No. Well, that's because there isn't one. However, if you wonder how racism creeps into policy, just view Lee's entire page. Oh, man. She also says that if you notice this stuff, if you notice the DEI policies happening, then this whole thing is driven by what she calls white panic. She says, we also know that the perception is the biggest driver of anti-DEI efforts. So this is led by what is called white panic, which is driven by fears of favoritism and special privileges for African Americans, that white workers would be forced out of their jobs as a way to make room for black workers. The thought is behind this is this racist anti-DEI tweet by Senator John Johnson. So if you notice this stuff, if you're against diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, then if you celebrate the demise of DEI, then you are, in her eyes, and many Democrats in Utah, then you're a white supremacist, you're a neo-Nazi, whatever it is. No, Darlene, that's just wrong. You are the racist. Sorry. These people are good people. John Johnson is a good senator, and Trevor Lee is a good state rep. Beyond that, he's also a good person. I know Trevor personally, and he is a good person. And Darlene, she's run for office several times. I talked about it in my last stream. She runs a campaign of hate. This is the most hate-filled Twitter account in Utah, I believe. It's a close one, but I believe that she wins for the most hateful Twitter account in the state of Utah. But speaking of the DEI bill, let me go back to the browser. Share that. Okay. Speaking of the DEI bill, Utah Democrats made nationwide news in all the right places for wearing all black and holding a eulogy or a mock funeral mourning the death of diversity, inclusion, and equity here in Utah. Pretty funny. They made it on they made it on the Daily Wire, Post Millennial. Matt Walsh did a podcast about it. End Wokeness on Twitter, a big Twitter account with a couple million followers. He highlighted how ridiculous this was, but everybody's having a good time making fun of these losers, and I have to say, I mean, it's pretty funny what they did here. Talk about being dramatic. Their little wearing black for a funeral thing. It's pretty funny. Pretty funny stuff, if you ask me. That doesn't want to play though, so we'll just pause that, and we will do one more before we finish up here. Let's see. We're not going to take calls. I changed my mind on that. So while we're speaking of DEI, we have some fake news just to talk about here. Whoops. Oh, there it is. Okay.
I'd like to welcome the fake news media, which is back there.
So here was the story by the fake news. They can make anything bad.
Don't be rude. You are fake news.
Sir,
go ahead.
They are the fake, disgusting news.
So the fake news in Utah is added again. Let's see if we can find this. Let's see. It looks like we're gaining a real loyal following here on Cruising Bane. Let's see here. Oh, yeah. Looks like we have a regular viewer. Let me just share my screen here. We have a regular viewer here. Sloppy Brian Schott of the Salt Lake Tribune. He's been watching the show. Glad to have you, Brian. And this guy's been obsessed with me ever since I put him on blast over his fake news, where he had done a whole article on Roman numeral 3 being painted on a mountain rock here in Utah, and he made a whole article about how this was an extremist symbol, and he went and got quotes from the ADL, and then it turned out, and even he noted in his article that the Roman numeral was incomplete, and he thought it was the 3%ers, a militia group trying to do recruiting here in Utah. And it turned out that it was a family of a prominent Utah lawyer, and he was something the third was his name. And so they had painted the Roman numeral 3 on a mountain rock on the anniversary of his death. And Brian Schott went and stealth edited his article, deleted all of his tweets promoting it. Well, he's been obsessively watching my show and tuning in. And here, just yesterday, he's blocked me on Twitter. Ever since I did that video, he blocked me a long time ago. But he still monitors my page. And yesterday he followed me, he unblocked me, followed me on Twitter, and then re-blocked me. Kind of funny. But last week, Brian Schott quote tweeted the KMMU live stream. Here it is right here. And what appears to be an effort to smear my wife, who's running for state school board, Brian Schott is using me in this live stream to try and smear my wife's campaign for school board, saying Adam Bartholomew, whose wife, Carrie Bartholomew, is running for state school board, is currently mocking people on his show right now. He is accusing transgender people of going into bathrooms and, quote, waggling it around. No, unfortunately, while that would be hilarious, no, I was not mocking transgender people in that live stream. How ridiculous. Let me go back to my browser here. It's purely an effort to smear someone who's running for office. So What I was doing on my live stream was talking about this tweet, a whole tweet thread, dozens of tweets from a transgender activist on Twitter who sicked their following on Kira Birkeland, the person pushing the bill that would prevent that would make it illegal for transgender individual to be in, like, for example, a transgender female, a man or boy that is becoming a female, to be in the locker room or in the bathroom with girls. Okay. And what the bill text that Aaron Reed had said was that, and Aaron Reed has a tweet here where this is part of a big thread before the bill had passed the House. And Aaron Reed had highlighted this text that says, line 3, an individual who enters a privacy space is in violation of subsection 1, commits the offense of criminal trespass if the individual, A, under the circumstances which the person should know, will likely cause an affront or alarm to, on or in the presence of another individual, or for any other intended use. So, and what I had said on my stream last week was, if you're outwardly presenting as female and you go in to use the women's restroom, nobody's going to care. Nobody's coming after you. Nobody's checking your genitals at the door. That is a lie. And it's a lie that's being pushed by the Democrats here in Utah, being pushed by these activists like Aaron Reed, who is a transgender mom. Aaron Reed pushing this to her 200,000+ followers and sicking them on Kira Birkeland. Okay. There was no mocking of transgender people. I was simply describing a scenario that would fit the description of the text in the bill. Okay. A scenario that has actually happened. A scenario that actually happened with Riley Gaines and Leah Thomas. Leah Thomas, the transgender woman that is a swimming champion in another state, and you can see the text on here. Leah Thomas, so well endowed, I had to refrain from looking. Riley Gaines, and here's a Daily Mail article. Trans swimmer Leah Thomas dropped her pants and exposed her male genitalia in the women's locker room after a meet, claims University of Kentucky athlete Riley Gaines. Now, and it wasn't just Riley Gaines. There was actually statements from other swimmers that were on this team where this guy, Leah Thomas, transgender woman. It's against YouTube policy to misgender someone, so I have to be really careful what I'm saying here. But Leah Thomas is a transgender woman who is still attracted to females. So Leah Thomas was in the locker room with a full, at command, full erection in the locker room. That is a scenario in which this bill would come into play, and actually it would be, and that would fit the context of the bill, which is what I was talking about. There's no mocking. While it's, it is a very mockable scenario, I wasn't actually mocking anybody. I was talking about an actual situation based off of the bill text. And this is what these lefties do. They use your words and they twist things and try and make it out that you're doing something in order to smear people. Obviously, this guy probably wants the existing guy, Randy Booth, who's the current school board rep here in my district. He quotes communists on his website. He supports all of these woke policies. The guy is, he probably aligns really well with Brian Schott over the Tribune. Well, this is what they do. They twist your words and they lie about you, okay, and try and smear people in order to influence elections, influence policy, just like Aaron Reed, who's sicking the mob after Kira Birkeland. In order for what reason? What's the purpose? It's to influence the legislature. And Brian Schott, did his thing, trying to say that that I was somehow, and tying it to my wife, putting her name in there on the tweet, trying to say that I'm somehow mocking transgender individuals, accusing them. I wasn't accusing anybody. I'm talking about an actual situation that happened. Okay, this isn't imaginary. Later in the week, let me go back to the Leah Thomas did exactly what I described, essentially. And these, rainbow fascists, they're going to do whatever they can to try and intimidate the legislature. And here's a tweet from Robert Gerke of the Salt Lake Tribune about a dad that confronted two principals at a girls' basketball game last week, and they're pushing these things out there to try and influence the legislature. And they are, and at the same time, like I said on this tweet, that this is designed to influence Governor Cox, which it is. The reason that they're pushing this and the reason that this story became a thing after this went to the governor's desk is because they're trying really hard to get Cox to veto this legislation. As far as I know, at the time of this this video, the Governor Cox hasn't signed it. And would he? Let's go back to this right here. This is back a couple years ago when the GOP here in Utah passed the transgender athlete ban, preventing boys from playing in girls' sports. And Governor Cox vetoed that bill. Now, I hope he'll do the right thing. Obviously, I hope that Governor Cox signs the bill. But I'm not going to put it past him if he to veto it. It's something that he's done in the past, something that he could do now, and I really hope that Governor Cox signs this bill. We are in an election season, so I imagine that he probably will sign it because he denounced DEI after the first 100 days accomplishment of him signing the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Pact. He's now meeting with the right people. He met with Path Forward Utah and a bunch of people that are on the right side of this issue. So hopefully Spencer Cox does the right thing. He is currently, fainting right to be able to get elected. So we'll see if that really happens. But later in the week, our number one fan here. Let me go back to my screen share. Later in the week, he had tweeted. Here it is. Okay. Later in the week, he had tweeted out a new article that he wrote about the DEI bill. And he had said, Utah GOP Rep Tim Jimenez is sponsoring legislation to block private businesses from requiring workers to embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion practices. He refused to provide any evidence that this practice was happening. Now, he did this. He did the same thing. Let's see here. It was a couple weeks ago, and he got quote tweeted by a bunch of people. Dan McKay, a bunch of other state senators, a bunch of state reps who quote tweeted him and said, hey, this stuff's, it was back when Governor Cox had denounced DEI a couple weeks ago. And he said that this is bordering on, this is starting to be, look like evil or something to that effect. And they said that Cox refused to provide any examples that are readily available. You could find all over the internet examples of Utah universities pushing diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. And these guys try to pretend like it doesn't exist. And then when they try to pretend that it's just something that's being made up by the Republicans in the state legislature. So I had tweeted it out, a picture of a screenshot of the tweet, okay, and saying GOP rep refused to do Brian's job for him. Once again, the Salt Lake Tribune's missing evidence is found with a simple web search. Everybody knows the Silicon Slopes companies and many more are forcing DEI policies just like the Utah universities. And Brian Schott, who monitors my page, he quote tweeted me again and says, wannabe conservative commentator pantsed himself on social media because he didn't read the article before posting. Jimenez cited anecdotal evidence during the committee hearing, but would not give specifics when I asked. Interesting. Let's go back to my browser here. Interesting turn of events there, Brian. Let's see here. So this wannabe who Brian monitors with his alt account, who he unblocks and follows and reblocks. The guy's like a 13-year-old girl, and he claims that this stuff's not happening. He wants to say, "Oh, Adam didn't read my article." Of course, I read your article. You don't need to have a $1 Tribune subscription to read Brian's articles. By the way, you go to archive.org, you plug in the web address of the article, you bring it up, you're able to see the article without paying the Salt Tribune. That you don't want to pay this certified public charity, but Brian Schott, he quote tweets me, says that I pantsed myself, and then he dons his tinfoil mind reading hat, and tries to say that I didn't read his article, and really what he's trying to do is push this narrative that it's all just quote panic. This is one of the things he said in his article. It's just panic being invented by the GOP rep. And then he said that Rep Jimenez struggled to articulate the problem, and he refused to provide evidence. But really, he's so desperate to keep this narrative alive that anytime somebody calls it out, he throws out these insults. But if you go onto Brian's page and throw an insult at him, then he'll say, "Oh, it's a bad faith argument. You're giving personal attacks," and then he'll block you. Okay. But then if you go against anything Brian says, if you go against anything that he says in his narrative, then he'll insult you personally. He'll insult you and call you names and all kinds of stuff. Totally hypocritical. It's pretty funny. But all he really accomplished here was proving that he lied to his Twitter followers. That's the reality. The guy's a liar, and anybody who follows his account can see that. Go back to this here. And the narrative that he's trying to push is that this stuff's all made up by GOP reps, and that narrative is bought 100%. It's swallowed hook, line, and sinker by his Twitter followers. The people that respond to his tweets, that see his tweets, they all... Oops, that's the wrong one. Here we go. These are some quote tweets from Brian's followers. And here's a reply. The Utah way. Legislate made up problems for emotional points. That's the narrative Brian's trying to push here, is that this is all made up. And he says in his tweet out to his followers, his 13,000 followers, that he refused to provide any examples. Well, he did provide examples. They're in his article, but Brian calls them anecdotal. So if you refuse to answer to Brian Schott, then you're refusing to provide evidence, basically. And his followers buy it hook, line, and sinker. Let's go back to this one. Don't tell businesses what to do unless it's something that we, the GOP, don't want them to do. It's a pro-business party unless the business is demanding its employees stop being racist. And it's hilarious that this guy will lie to his Twitter followers and then try and insult me. And really, all he does is out himself as a liar. That's all he accomplished. All he did was show that his Twitter followers, the guy is full of crap. Go back to my browser here. Let's see here. Okay. So yeah. So the guy's totally full of it. And let's see. And then I have a person who responded to my tweet where I showed, no, actually I did read your retarded article. And this Normie Utah account, the fake narrative, not answering to Brian is cannot provide evidence. The reality, choosing not to debase themselves by participating in the fake news engineering game. He is literally the least connected, most toxic turd to be avoided in Utah media. I don't know. The guy seems pretty connected. I mean, he's got Deidre Henderson and Governor Cox on his phone to instantly text. But this other person that follows Brian said, but why should government have the right to tell national companies what they can and cannot do? Kind of echoing the other tweets that I showed of the pro-business party until the businesses, Who knows? Whatever it is. But the reality is that the government already tells businesses what to do. They already tell businesses that discrimination based off the color of your skin is wrong. Okay. We can't have the government telling you that discrimination is wrong, but yet you should also discriminate for diversity, equity, inclusion. That doesn't make sense you can't have both. Okay. And not only that, but I mean, have you ever heard of OSHA? The government tells businesses what to do already. And like I said here, arguably, most of it is bad for business. So Sloppy Brian Schott, pushing his fake narrative. The guy's a total joke. Pretty funny that he unblocked me just to follow me and then reblocked me just so he can monitor my page. Pretty pathetic. But there's one more thing I really need to address here. And it's Brian's claim here, his even bigger claim that I really need to address here on air, where he says, wannabe conservative commentator who so desperately wants to be taken seriously. Brian, never have I once asked to be taken seriously. So that's just another lie in a long string of lies. So can't believe anything from this guy. The guy's a total fake. He's a left-wing activist. And if you ever want to see the video of Brian Schott, here it is right here. Nope, that's not it. That's my live stream. Let's go back to it. I guess your top video gets pinned when you're live. Anyway, I did a really nice piece about the Brian's fake news. I've done a few of them. The guy's a joke. So thanks for tuning in, coming with me while we go down Utah Main Street and talk about some of the issues of the day. And big thanks to Brian Schott for watching our show and quote tweeting the stream on KMMU. We really appreciate that, Brian. And thanks to Aaron Davidson for coming on the show and talking about elections. And we have another comment here from Richard Duran. He says, Adam for senator. I don't know about that, Richard. That's taking it a little far. I don't think that's something that I can do there. So I appreciate the sentiment, though, but I'm definitely not going to be running for senator. So thanks for joining us here on KMMU, Main Street Media, Utah. Next time we'll be taking calls. I don't have the call-in number here listed on my thing, and my call screener isn't here today. So we'll take calls next time, and we'll try to be on time next time as well and have things in order. I had everything is all dialed in. I had the slideshow all ready to go, and then you just can't get it to work. Everything breaks. You fix one thing, you break another. So that's just the way it goes. So appreciate you joining the stream. Be sure to call in next time. Next Monday we'll be live every Monday between 4 and 6.